Well, welcome everyone. I'm really happy to be here in such illustrious company. I must say I only really understood the solution-focused gallery when I read Mark's book. I encountered it in a training with Chris, 2008. I still have the notes to prove it. It didn't fully sink into my head, and I invented another model to illustrate the solution-focused process that I use in organizations, because I used to always think of a change project as a conversation with an organization. Yeah, I used to think of that when I got lost and the customer said, well, what shall we do now, and where are we with this group, and what's going on, and what's the next step? I always thought, okay, what would I do in a solution-focused conversation? And then when Mark's book came out and I reread it, it really
Just to clarify, we're talking about the next generation of solution-focused practice here. Mark's book, which is 2021, not the solutions focus.
Yeah, no, that's a long time ago. Yeah, that was also very inspirational. All your books are very inspirational, but I mean the next generation. And then it really clicked with me. I thought this is a much better model, because it allows you to go through the gallery. It's a process, but then it also makes it clear you can go back and you can revisit rooms, etc., etc. Yeah, so I thought I would like to deepen everyone's understanding, my own understanding included, of the gallery. How did it come about? And that's why I asked Mark and Chris to join in with me and also explain to you how the gallery came about, what is important about it. Because you always say in solution focus, we say, trust the process. So what's the process, and why should we trust it? And what does it do for us? Yeah. So those are the questions that hopefully you might find some inspiration about. But first of all, in representation for Chris, because he would surely want to ask you this question, try and find a friend, a new friend, somebody who you haven't spoken to today. Yeah. Pair up with this person. Question is, what are your best hopes from this session? And then the next question is, and what else? Next question is, and what difference would that make? And you ask, what difference would that make, at least 3 times. Chris always makes the point and says, maybe you discover something even more interesting than your first idea. Yeah, there are always more best hopes. Yeah, so 5 minutes, all of you together. Find a new friend, 2 minutes per person, chatting about your best hopes.
Okay, everyone. So thank you very much indeed. Let's get the session underway, and I hope that your best hopes will be answered, and there'll be plenty of time for questions at the end, and we can talk about it then. So we're now going to introduce our colleague Chris Iveson on video. Chris was hoping to come. He couldn't make it in the end. He has many commitments these days as a retired grandfather with a dog, which takes up all of his time and more. And but he did make us this video. There's 2 sections to it. It's 6 minutes and 4 minutes. So about 10 minutes in total. And in the first part, he'll talk about how he got the idea for the SF art gallery metaphor. And then the second video, he'll describe what it is. And we'll be describing that as well. And there are various different takes on it. I first came to this idea in having breakfast opposite Chris at Sol 2012 in Oxford. And he'd given a workshop about the importance of building descriptions based on a paper he'd done with Guy Shannon the year before, which seemed to show that building descriptions was very effective and may even be briefer than the kind of classic SF methods. And I said, I think you're right. I think description building is the thing. And we had a chat and we decided to write a paper together. And the paper took about 3 years to do because we were very busy with all sorts of things. But it did come out, and it's called Brief Therapy Focused Description Development. And I gave it that title deliberately because it's in a series of 3 papers. The first was the start of MRI-based problem-focused brief therapy, which is called Brief Therapy Focused Problem Resolution. The second, by Steve DeShazer and colleagues, was Brief Therapy Focused Solution Development. And the third one, by Chris and me, Brief Therapy Focused Description Development. And each of these describes a different approach, I think, to the brief therapy metaphor, the brief therapy mindset, the brief therapy idea and aesthetic. And I do think it's that much of a development. I think this is the third generation of SF, the second generation of solution focus. And the gallery brings together so much rich stuff in such an accessible way. And I didn't know the gallery at this point when I had the conversation, and Chris is always very, very bashful, we say in English, about who invented it, and he would never really stand up and say he invented it, but I think he did. And anyway, we'll hear the story here. I certainly can't find anyone else who's claiming to have invented it. There are people who've developed it, and we'll talk more about that afterwards. But if we're ready to roll the tape, let's roll the tape.
Hello, everybody. I'm Chris Iveson. Sorry I can't actually be with you, but Suzanne has asked me if I'll tell you the story of the origins of the gallery metaphor. So here it is. "I don't want you to come," said Charlotte, my daughter, referring to her end-of-year school art exhibition. "What? Of course I'm going to come," I replied. "No, you're not. You'll just be embarrassing with your stupid jokes." And not a shred of humour in her tone. In the end, I did go, but on pain of death if I said anything daddish. Charlotte was right. I'd been less than sympathetic to the conceptual nature of the art taught at her school. Did a 5-year-old draw this? Did the builders leave a pile of bricks behind? And many more equally cheap dad jokes. I needed to find a new approach to this challenge. It wasn't that I hadn't tried. I'd seen piles of bricks, stacks of boxes, twists of wire, and an unmade bed. But still, dad jokes lingered. Well, I had to try harder. It was the night before the exhibition that an answer came to me. Don't judge, just ask. Look, and instead of needing to know what it is, instead of trying to be diagnostic, ask yourself questions. And if you're lucky, ask the artist too. This thought alone created a new excitement. With that came another clue. Look forward to the experience. Expect to be challenged and to discover something new. In the event, I proved to be the star parent. Around 20 final year students stood by their stalls. Many of them I'd known since they were toddlers, and at each stall I stopped, looked, let the experience wash through me, and asked questions. Joanna's neat pile of sackcloth, Laura's array of empty frames, Joe's concrete and pipework, Izzy's sheets, and many more. By the end, I felt a great sense of appreciation. Look back on Charlotte's work with an entirely new lens. A few weeks later, I was driving to Bristol to run one of our courses. The entire south of England was caught in a raging storm, and the roads were turning into rivers. Poor visibility and intense concentration on the business of staying alive made me miss the signs marking my journey, until for a brief moment, appearing out of the spray, Birmingham, 10 miles. Birmingham? A few seconds before I realised that I was on the wrong road, the M40 instead of the M4. A nerve-wracking hour later, I was on the right road, with the possibility, albeit remote, that I might reach Bristol in time. But what state would I be in when I arrived? Time for my self-supervision. Let's imagine, I began to myself, that this proof course proves to be one of the best courses you've ever run. What will you notice about yourself in the 2 or 3 seconds before you open your mouth to begin? A few minutes into this internal dialogue came the question, and how will you know that this is one of your best courses? Because I have a new idea, was my response. Might that be, I asked. You have to wait and see, I replied. Towards the end of the course, I was summarizing the approach. Out of the blue, a gallery image appeared on a flip chart. Something like this. First came the art gallery. I didn't mind the kind of gallery that can be found in many northern English towns. It has the facade of a small, smoke-blackened Greek temple representing 19th century industrial opulence, but behind this facade is another story. Why spend money on art? So my gallery only has 2 rooms, each with a corner taken off at a later time to house the ticket office and the shop. Like Greek temples, northern galleries have steps leading up to the entrance, and I saw these as representing the state of positive anticipation I discovered for myself when approaching Charlotte's exhibition. The ticket office buys us legitimacy and gives us permission to explore what lies beyond. Often a simple interaction, but not always. My wife and I once spent so long dithering in the ticket hall about which exhibition to choose at the National Gallery that it became too late to see either. The first room in my gallery is devoted to tomorrow's art and offers a collection of postmodern paintings, sculptures and videos. It presents a challenge to the visitor with careful attention, particularly to our response to each work, makes for an emotional and thoughtful experience. The second room houses yesterday's art, a standing collection of past masters, featuring mainly artists from the previous century. At first, the difference between the 2 rooms seems unbridgeable, till the realization dawns the first room couldn't exist without the second. Yesterday's art contains the history of tomorrow's, and now everything looks different. As we descend the steps, we have a powerful sense of appreciation of our time in the gallery that it gave us. The art gallery then provides a metaphor, a solution-focused session. The ticket office is where we work out the purpose of the session. What are your best hopes from this conversation? Once we have an answer that we and the client can work towards, we move into the first room. To elicit a description of the client's hoped-for future, often beginning with the miracle question. Let's imagine while you're asleep tonight a miracle happens and it brings forward your hoped-for future. What's the first thing you might notice? There's no right amount of time to stay in this room. It could be the whole session, or just a brief visit before moving into the room containing the history of the sought-after outcome. This is where the scale is most useful. We use the scale to look back and trace the journey so far. What have you done to reach this point? Even when the client hasn't stepped onto the first rung, we might be interested in everything they've done and are doing to keep alive their hopes for a better future. Then comes the shop, which, like the gallery shop, will be full of false promise. The shop is where we might ask for the next small signs of progress, 1 point higher on the scale. It can be tempting to see this as the most important part of the gallery, and even skip the preamble of examining the pictures. The mistake is to think that the answer to this question, what the client may do next, lead to the solution. Like experienced gallery goers, many solution-focused brief therapists will no longer stop at the shop and trust that enough has been done in the conversation to walk through the 2 rooms. However, some therapists will choose, as did Steve DeShazer, to take a more cursory look around the first room and use 1 point up the scale to elicit more detail about the client's hoped-for future. With this approach, the shop becomes vital. Finally, we have to leave the gallery and descend the steps. Traditionally, this represents the affirmative feedback or compliments to the client, and more recently, some have replaced this with a brief summary of the session. Alternatively, Steps might represent a silent appreciation of the client, so the conversation's final words are their own. The value of this metaphor has been its simplicity. In a solution-focused conversation, there are not many places to go. Once we have our ticket, sometimes the most challenging part of the process, we have only 2 questions. How much of it is already happening? What will your hoped-for future look like? There are infinite ways of asking these questions, but they remain only 2. At any point on your work, we can take stock. How much do we know of what the client wants? How much do they already have? If we find ourselves lost, we just have to remember our last question and ask which room it was from and regain our bearings. And if we're still lost, it's likely that we have the wrong ticket, in which case we go back to the ticket office and check with another best hopes question. Lastly, just as you don't need to be an art expert or even an art lover to visit a gallery, you don't have to be an expert therapist or even a believer in client strengths and resources to be an effective solution-focused brief therapist. As de Shazer was fond of saying, believing in the client is a pragmatic decision, not an act of faith. Behave respectfully in the gallery, you'll be welcome. Behave respectfully towards your clients, then you'll be as successful as any other therapist. The requirement, beyond the techniques themselves, is to be sufficiently respectful of the client that they answer the questions we ask. The therapy is to be found in their answers. So that's one story out of the blue. And behind me is another. So, thank you for listening. And Suzanne has the other story, the blue on blue. Bye-bye.
Isn't that fascinating? That's the first time I've seen that. And it's much the most detailed description I've ever heard Chris give of this, and indeed admit that he probably invented it, which is really good. Well done, Chris. On the screen now, this is the version of the art gallery metaphor that I included in my book, The Next Generation of Solution-Focused Practice. And that book is it's for any kind of SF practitioner, right? It could be for a therapist, it could be for a coach, it could be for an OD consultant, it could be for a teacher, anybody. So it's a very general book. And I love the way that this simple model brings the idea of description building into an important context. And you recognize there basically the same rooms that Chris was talking about. We have the ticket office, and that's where we establish what does the client want. What's the name of the thing the client wants, basically. And so it's not, and in the old days, Paul Jackson and I, we called it platform building. I still think that's a good title of what you do. It's kind of lining, what is this about? What is this about? And in a way, that then becomes the title of the exhibition that's in the art gallery. Because everything in the rest of the gallery is about that thing, that's on that theme. And so you can do best hopes, as Chris likes to do. What's the common project? What's the project we're working on? That's a formulation that Harry Corman brought up, the common project between the practitioner and the client. We're working together on this project of yours. And so there are different ways to do it, but we need to find out what does the client want? What are we talking about in general terms? And then, having got a halfway decent answer to that, we can move into the rest of the gallery, which is much more important, of course. So I call it the future gallery, which is descriptions from the future, the better future, very often framed in terms of a day after a miracle or something like that. A change has happened, you wake up, and now you have to discover that the change has happened. What are you going to notice? And on the other side, I followed Chris's example. He now calls this the instances gallery, or he has done. The other people call it the progress gallery or the past gallery. But this is descriptions from the past and the present that connect with the same theme and often use a scale from 1 to 10 as a starting point for looking at things. So you can do a present description on a scale from 1 to 10 on this topic, and 10 is amazing and the future perfect, and 1 is nothing at all. Where are you right now? 4. How come you're at a 4 right now? And then we're beginning to build a present description of 4. How come it's 4 and not less, of course, and all that stuff. And then we can go back to find when were you higher on the scale, those sorts of things. Or think of a time in the last few weeks or months where you felt more of this. And then we can unpack that and get a description. And then finally, as Chris says, you come out to the gift shop, appreciative summaries perhaps, images of N+1 if you want. But I'll come back to the gift shop. So here's the thing. Each gallery may have a number of descriptions in it, just as an art gallery has a number of pictures in it, yeah? And each description is of a kind of a snapshot or a moment or an experience or a short sequence of experiences in the client's life, either in the future, the present, or the past. And so it's very easy to see, if you're going to do a miracle question, you might start off with having breakfast on the day after the miracle, and how's that different? And I've had, remember people talking about squeezing their orange juice differently on the day after the miracle. And then perhaps in organisational things, we're going to work, and then we arrive at work, and then there's a key meeting with the boss, and then there's a project review in the afternoon, and then we're going home, and then we're meeting our family again in the evening. And each of these is potentially a description. And that's akin to a different picture on the wall. And this gives us the clue that when we get a moment that's important, we don't just get a one-shot description. Once we've got the name of the description, our job is to build that description with the client. And we do it by asking these questions, such as, what difference would that make to you? There are I've identified 4 kind of classic bases for these questions. What difference would that make to you? Which is about consequences. What would be the first tiny signs that was happening? It's about detail. Who else would notice, and what would they notice? It's about other perspectives. And finally, what else? Or what next? Which is about extending into the next areas. And what Chris and other people have done is develop the use of those questions kind of around and around and around into an absolute art. And this is a real difference from the solution-focused practice that we used to watch Steve DeShazer and Insoo Kim Berg do, and I watched them do it as well. They would often get 1 or 2 answers to this and then move on. And they didn't really expand on the things, on the events. Whereas as soon as somebody says, "Oh, I'd be feeling a bit better," or something, Chris is in, and what difference would that make? Right? It's in English we say it's like a ferret up a drain pipe. It's a very fast response, almost automatic response, and it starts to unpack this description. And so you can see the idea of the images dotted around the future gallery, the images dotted around the past gallery. And the game is not to get lots of images. The game is to get detail in the descriptions, the images that you do have. And here's the thing. The fine detail in those descriptions, each one of them is nearly actionable. It's kind of the beginnings of an action. If you get tiny detail, the difference between description and action becomes very blurry. You're describing something in great detail, and it begins to become clear what kind of things you might do. Now, we don't talk about that typically, but the client is starting to think about it. So that when we come to leaving the gallery...
Can you elaborate on that? Each detail has actionable potential?
Yes.
Can you elaborate on that?
I'll try. I can say it again, if that would help.
For me, it's the most important.
Yeah, well, we need a setup. But so suppose you say, I'd feel more confident at work tomorrow. What difference would that make? Well, I'd be able to go into the meeting feeling better. Okay, and how would your colleagues notice you were feeling better? Well, they'd probably see me walking in a little bit more tall, a little bit more slowly, and with my notes under my arm. Okay, and what else? Oh, and then they'd see me sit down and confident and arrange my notes, and then look around and say, "Good morning, everyone." Now, you see how we've gone from feeling more confident at work tomorrow to the idea of walking slightly differently, carrying something, and then sitting down in a certain way. Now, all of those those are potentially things you could do. But we don't say, aha, that's something you could do, isn't it? Can you do that? Can you do that? And, I used to do that, and I've seen Steve DeShazer do that. Is that something you could do? But there's no need. There's no need for that. And the brilliance of this description building picture that Chris and others have brought to us is that you realise that you don't need to prod them into action. The door is open. And in an average 45 minutes coaching, there will be dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of these little tiny differences. And we can't say, are you going to do that one or that one? It's a stupid question. Yeah? But there's so many of them that actually the client is in the end has so much choice about it. And in Chris's ways, we should leave them to that choice to them. It's not our business. Now, in organizational settings, people are more accustomed to having action plans and agreed actions and things. And so I think in organizational settings, I think it's still okay to confirm that people have an idea of what they're going to do next and have some conversation about that, because it's part of the culture of an organization. And maybe we'll talk about this when Suzanne gives her example in a minute. So this is the difference. It's not getting just a one answer to the day after the miracle, or one answer to when were you at 6 on a scale. It's about unpacking that in detail with these subsidiary questions, these description building questions. And that gets us a series of descriptions, but not necessarily in the usual time order. This is the funny thing about solution-focused work. We very often go for the future descriptions first. You don't have to. It's always a choice. But normally, many people go for the future descriptions first and then the past descriptions. And here's the strange thing, that our clients have no difficulty whatsoever in putting that together for themselves. And it's a little bit like there are some strange films that start at the end and work back. Was it Memento was one of them? Strange thing where each scene is before the previous one. But you can still watch it and you can still make sense of it. It's what as human beings we do. We can construct these, we join the dots. We construct the storylines. And you can also take a narrative perspective on this as well, if you want. There's even a word I learned last week called emplotment, which is the putting together of scenes into an order that forms a story. And that would be another perfectly good way of looking at this if you had a narrative interest. But you don't need to do that. Works for itself. And so I think that this offers us a real insight into the second-by-second practice of solution-focused work in organizations as much as in face-to-face coaching and therapy. And I do think it's a difference. There is a nice micro-analysis paper by Adam Freuer and Cecil Walker, who are from Elliot Connie's group. And they did a micro-analysis of this kind of SF and the other kind of SF, and they can clearly see the distinctions that I'm talking about. So this is real differences. Now, how much difference it makes, we don't know, but it's neat, and it's specific, and it's really learnable and doable. And I think that's a fantastic gift. So that's my story on the gallery and why I think it's so good. Now, Suzanne is going to give us, I hope, an example. All right. Yeah. All right, well, let's keep it. Let's offer an opportunity for questions, but we want to hear from Suzanne as well. But I'm very happy to take any other questions. Yes, we have one here.
So you said there are so many paths you can take throughout the session.
Yes.
Where to ask.
Yes.
What is your way? Like, which one do you choose? How do you decide where to go deeper or not?
There's no deep. There's no deep in solution focus. There's detail. Right. It's all on the surface. It's all things we would notice and other people would notice. And if people give other answers, that's fine. We just go for what difference would that make? What would be the first tiny size? So, how do we? So, for me, as a practitioner, there's a key. Once you've built the platform, you've got the ticket in the ticket office. Are you going to go future or past first? And my personal way to that is, if it sounds like it's something that they have experience of before, I'll go past first. If it sounds like something that's new to them, I'll go future first. But the good news is it doesn't really matter, because it's very forgiving. And if you're not getting anywhere in the past, you can go to the future. And if you're not getting anywhere in the future, you can go to the past. So, and each description changes, as Chris said, that not only the ones that come next, but it also changes the ones that came before, which is really bizarre. But it just works. And people just enjoy this exploration of this better future, present and past. Because it's not problem-focused, it's not blame-focused, it's not all those other things, right? And it's not a kind of conversation that they will have had before, almost certainly. And just to add, while we're talking about that, there is another version of this out now, recently, Elliot Connie and Adam Freuer's solution-focused diamond, which is another way of getting to much the same place, but it may be even better, I don't know. But it certainly takes you into this idea of the future, the present, and the past of the thing you want. And you can move between those things. And that gives wonderful flexibility in exactly the same way that this model does, but it may explain it a little more directly, I don't know. Well worth catching.
Yeah.
When you work with clients, do they know?
When you work with clients, do they know that you work with such, or is it just in your mental?
It's for me.
Yeah.
It's for me. No, there's absolutely no need to explain this to people. It just confuse them, I think. No, it's for me. It's a practitioner's help. That's how I view it. Thank you, Jan.
Thank you. Very inspiring. I want to share a thing which fits very good to this. I remember an EPTA conference in Malmö and a workshop of Ben Fuhrman, and he said in the conversation the client develop like something like was das Blumenstrauß? Bunch of flowers, and he said then the client produces, because of the questions, he or she produces a bunch of flowers. And when the question is over, you would not say to somebody, now choose which of the flowers is the best flower. He just leaves with the bunch of flowers.
Yes.
And it's not necessary to say what is the important description of of these many detailed descriptions you made. He just left with a bunch of flowers. And what I find a little inspiring, how Elliot Connie it phrases, he says it's not necessary, as he said, at the end, you just say, thank you for coming, and the client leaves. And it's not necessary to narrow it to something. Or say, what is the most important thing you talked about, or something like this. So this is, as you described it, it's a very interesting idea to say the only job is the two questions. As Chris said, the tick for sure, ticket and so on. What is the platform? Yeah. And to encourage the conversational partner to make descriptions.
Yes.
Whoops.
In detail.
And that's indeed, and the details, and that's it. That's it. It's so interesting to...
That's it. And there is a key bit, of course, underpinning all of this, Wolfgang, which is that why are we asking the questions? Are we asking them so we can hear the answers? Or are we asking them so the client can hear their own answers? And in the very beginning of MRI therapy, it was the first. Steve DeShazer and Insoo were somewhere in the middle. But now, I think we're kind of coming down to, no, it's really so the client can hear their own answers. Which is why we don't need to understand it. We just need to keep nudging it. Keep expanding it with these little questions. Thank you, Wolfgang. Right, now, Suzanne is now, I think, going to give us an organizational case that is based on the same principles. And so we'll see how that stacks up.
I'm going to give the case tomorrow. Today, I'm going to talk about my version of the gallery.
Excuse me, I'm muddling up our two workshops.
Too many things going on. You have it here. And I've also put it up here for me because I also underlined some things. I want to say it's still in progress. It's still work in progress for me. because I was transferring. I had this wheel model. Yeah? In my last 2 books, I used the wheel as a model for the solution-focused OD process. I'm just transferring it to the gallery. And so it keeps changing a little bit. And I wanted to point out mainly the differences. There's so many things the same. Yeah, like the thing that we just talked about, Mark just talked about regarding the details. Yeah, with the details, it came to my mind in organizations. I call it the preferred future gallery, but you can also say the future gallery. It's almost a multimedia gallery. Yeah, because when you have a lot of people in the room, you sometimes have the opportunity to enact little scenes, yeah, and interactions, and we ask them for different kinds of interactions, yeah. And when scenes start to develop, it becomes almost cinematic, yeah. So it's like a different film that they're suddenly imagining, yeah, through your talking, but then also they're starting to enact it. And once they have enacted it in the workshop or in conversations with each other, it's more likely that they will also enact it in organizational life. But let's look at the gallery. For me, the foundation of the gallery is really, really key. I think in some instances, it's the essential thing, because there are some and that's maybe also a word of warning. There's some instances when this process doesn't help. Yeah, there's some situations where, as an OD coach, and I'm an OD coach, I help organizations change, and that sometimes takes 2 or 3 years. And there's some stages in the process where I think, where am I? I just have to cooperate with the client in the way they need to be cooperated with at this particular moment. Yeah? And I don't know, am I in the future gallery or in the progress gallery or wherever I am? Yeah. So sometimes, new manager comes on board. I'm telling the story tomorrow, and you just need to improvise in the moment, and you need to do that a lot. Yeah. And so, what remains? How can I say I'm still working in a solution-focused way? And the only thing I can say sometimes is I keep my stance, I keep my way of being. The more I'm in my solution-focused self, in my being respectful, appreciative, optimistic, interested, curious, the more I can be helpful. At least that's how it works for me. Yeah, so that's a key thing. Then coming into the ticket office, sometimes the hardest part, but the most important part, no project without contracting, no project without platform building. Obviously, that's important. Part of the questions to ask is the where to. Yeah, you need to get a direction, you need to get an idea of what are we doing this for, or what does the organization want to change for. Maybe one little difference is in a change process where you need lots of stakeholders, I very early on start asking for who. Yeah, who else? Who are the stakeholders? What difference will it make to whom? Yeah, so I start from the very beginning, the stuff that we discussed with Stefan this morning. Who are the stakeholders? Who will notice? Who needs to be integrated? Yeah, right in the ticket office. Not to forget also that the work we're doing in the ticket office often already feeds into the preferred future gallery. Yeah, some of the contracting input, I often also put it into my tender documents or my offers. We're already feeding into and hanging pictures up in the preferred future gallery. Very important, of course. Sometimes that's the most important part of the process. Yeah, if the process has to stop because the company runs out of money, that would be a good place to stop. Yeah, if we've done a good job, I always say, if half the work is done when we have a good image, lots of details of the preferred future. What is different in organizational work? Diversity of perspectives. Obviously, if you have a one-on-one coaching, then it's the perspective of that person. But if you have 5,000 people involved, you need the different target groups represented. You need to have more than one opinion than that of the executive team. Yeah. So paying attention to that. Another thing is what sometimes helps with large-scale change is to search for and also to find either a generative question or a generative image. Now, what's that? That's a term that I have borrowed from Dialogic OD, and it's for me that's a question that generates a lot of answers. Yeah, a question that somehow puts the purpose of the change initiative in a nutshell. It can be a question or it can be an expression. Yeah, like a team I worked with last week, they said, we want to talk about our customers as fans and friends. Yeah, for them it made sense. It was not customer centricity and customer enthusiasm, but it can be anything. It can be, I've had images, I've had pictures. One hospital once, they chose a Wimmelbild, with the hospital in the middle. It needs to arise out of the process. You can't dictate it. If an executive team wants to dictate a slogan or a motto, often doesn't work. So that's one thing that's different. I think as an OD coach, you're also a little bit more involved, or you are a little bit more involved in formulating experiments. As a coach, you wouldn't do that. You would let the coach, the coachee go into their life and do whatever they do. Yeah, out of that bunch of flowers, see which ones do they want to plant or give away or whatever. So that's a job that sort of, leads you then into the progress gallery. I call it progress gallery simply because I'm also teaching OD coaches, so it connects a little bit better with the language in organizations. Yeah, and that's what it's all about, making progress. Obviously, signs of progress is important. I led the organization. The scale is a fantastic model, and if the organization has no method for tracking progress, I introduce it. But there are so many ways of tracking progress. And the main thing is that it's being done. I think what we need to pay attention to is also, as coaches, is not just what progress are they making in their work streams, in their sub-projects, in their culture initiatives, whatever it is, but also to reflect on what are they learning out of this. Yeah, because this is what will stay. That way we're building the change competence of the organization. So paying a little bit more attention to that, and then of course also to help them stop experiments. That's often the hardest. Nobody ever stops an experiment unless they have to. So stopping it, starting it, expanding it. I think what we need to do to prepare our elegant exit out of the gift shop is to embed, to hand over tasks, and to let go. Yeah, to make ourselves indispensable all through the process. Yeah, so if once you find something's working, some group is taking over, you train someone up, you let go, and you can then start doing something else, or you can start saying goodbye. Yeah. I've pointed out a few more things that I thought were different. Maybe I've said some of them already. We'll check. What's the same, what's different? I think it's our job to get people to talk to each other more than to get them to talk to us. Yeah, as a direct coach, you asking questions, you're steering the conversation. That way, you have a lot more control, of course. In OD, that's different. You need to pave paths for solution-focused conversations of others, and you need to trust that they are being useful. I think what we're doing. Chris is always saying we need to create homes for solutions. And I really like that. That helps me, when a customer comes and says, "Oh, we have these problems, and can you help me solve them?" I can't solve it for you, but I can help you create a home where your solutions can arise. And that's why my gallery has a resources room. And I know that the resource focus or aspect is an integral part of all the rooms, of the whole process. So I have drawn it in this image as a kind of glass cubicle where you can go in and out, and where the light of the resource shines on all parts of the progress, or the process. I think it's really important, can be important in the ticket room, to form realistic best hopes, because very often, the executive team, we're going to do this and we're going to do that, and it's all going to be wonderful. but the resources of the organizations don't quite permit it. Yeah, so it needs to be connected, and also in all the other phases. We need to be aware as OD coaches that we're mostly working with groups. Yeah, we have one-on-one conversations, but most of the time we're working with the change team, we're working with cross-sector groups, we're working with project teams, all sorts of people, and not everybody is in the same room at the same time. Yeah, so we need to keep an overview and need to be aware. And the fact, I mean, often the managers, the executive team, they've been here, they've spent a lot of time, or they think they've spent a lot of time here, yeah? At least with you, they've spent some time. So they want to get going. Let's do this. So, you know, and you need to find a balance between pacing it right. Yeah, you want to keep the impetus. Yeah, if they want to do something, yes, great. But then on the other hand, if it's not quite clear what the direction is and people don't understand what does this mean for me, then that's not good enough. Yeah? So making sure that everybody gets a ticket. Yeah, that's important. And then take them through, and also it's not a drama if you need to return to the preferred future room. It's actually quite normal. And you should be looking in there all the time and saying, are we still on track? Is this still the right thing to do? Do we need to adapt something? Do have the conditions changed? Yeah, so that's one other thing. I've said that, yeah, tool overload, that's sometimes a challenge, especially with the agile community being in full swing. Sorry, Ralph. Managers love their tools, and there's another one, and there's another one, and there's let's do an impact mapping process, and let's do the minimum viable project analysis, blah, 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 blah. Try to keep the process clean, yeah, and simple. Yeah, if an overload of tools always creates confusion. Some tools are very, very useful. I always try to adapt them in a solution-focused way, but less is more sometimes. Finally, no, it's not quite finally. In a solution-focused coaching, sometimes you like to go out with a whisper. Yeah, you like to. Sometimes, you know, if you had an intense conversation, you like to have that conversation go on in your coachee's head. Have you ever had a conversation that you could carry it on? And if that happens with the coaching, that's wonderful. And that's also wonderful with an OD process. Yeah, if the organization, you know, wants to carry on, and then, you know, you steal away. You say, okay, you can always contact me when you need me, but carry on. Yeah, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. So you can do that if it's fitting. I would say it should be a fitting ending. You know, some people say, okay, you just leave. Yeah, but you shouldn't just leave. And in some instances, you need to also there's something is needed to close the gestalt. Yeah, so that people have a feeling, we've done this. And if they've done something marvelous and they want to have a great party, then let them have a great party. Yeah, and help them organize it. And last but not least, this is my preferred process. Yeah, it helps me orientate, and it's a preferred process. It's an ideal. It's not a checklist. It's not something you can tick off and say blah blah blah. But as I said earlier, sometimes you just need to be flexible and cooperate with the way that is needed in this moment, in this context, maintaining your solution-focused attitude and mindset. Yeah, that was it from my side. I forgot to time myself. And now, maybe there are some insights from you, maybe there are some questions from you. So maybe you would like to pair up with two duos or two other duos. Just turn to people around you and talk a little bit about what were interesting insights, both from Mark's and Chris's and my presentation. 7 minutes time to talk to your colleagues, collect insights and questions, and then we'll have a discussion, all of us together. All right? All right. Now we'd like to hear from you. have some feedback, have some questions, have some ideas, what you do. How do you think of the solution-focused process? Why do you trust it? Yeah.
Just a short, not solution-focused complaining. In a big project we do, it seems like they are not interested to measure progress. So they say, no, we don't want to measure. We don't want in the project. Yeah, the manager says, no, not we want. We don't know. We say we have to measure. This is so important. No, we don't want to measure it. And it was funny that Ivanka said, oh, it's a little bit the same at the company which I work. So the organization seems not to be interested to measure performance or progress. It's interesting. Yeah, just to mention this.
You could stop complaining and you could add a question. Yeah. How did it happen to you? And how do you deal with organizations who say we don't want to track the progress?
I don't know. I've never met an organization. Anybody got an answer? Yeah?
What is in the culture that they have so much trust that they don't need to progress?
What else? How else would you?
No, the question would be then how do you track progress, or what kind of options do you see as good for tracking the progress?
Well, I do it in a very simple way, and ask people on a scale of 0 to 10, how far are they? How much progress after having. The condition is that you have developed an image of the preferred future with them. Yeah, but I can think of one concrete project, for example. It was a long. It took sort of 2 years or so. It was more sort of a culture change than hardcore change, and then we were scaling the most. The fuzziest topics, actually, decision-making quality with the leaders, and decisions are made at the right level, stuff like that. I always go for the scale. Yeah, but then there's project teams, and they want to go into a lot more detail. I must honestly say I've never encountered an organization that has not wanted to track progress. Oh, have I? Yeah? How?
I can't come up with a hypothesis in the project we are working on. I think it's very interesting. You said you have to be something like you have to be clear about the preferred future, and then the fuzzier things you can make a scaling question. And it could be in our project that the preferred future gallery, the rich, detailed description of a preferred future gallery, I think is a little bit weak. And so it's understandable that they say, how should we don't want to And this could be, there could be a relationship between this, that it could be richer. It's kind of vague, and let's start and let's do it. It's very nice, the project is nice, but it could be richer. And this could be a reason to avoid, could be.
Haven't you also noticed that sometimes when you keep asking interested questions about what is happening, because customers say no, nothing has happened, we haven't got on at all, and this happened to me in a very important project. We've made progress on all the hard topics and the office move, but not our culture. And then when you ask in detail, how is this different, and how do people, and when you ask the people, and when you bring them on board, yeah, something has changed after all. Yeah, so collecting the details also at the progress tracking level. And also I always say not monitor performance. I try to avoid these words. I say track progress, or celebrate progress, or enjoy what you have managed to do, and let's look at this, and la 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 la. And that takes out the fear. Oh my God, we have to show progress.
Of course, if you wanted to be very annoying, you could turn their what's the word? You could use a scaling question. So, on a scale from 1 to 10, how willing are you to monitor progress? And because it's not in solution focus, it's all about not avoiding absolutes. So it's not yes, no. There's all sorts of different positions in between. And so another thing might be to say, well, turn it into a scale and say, on the scale of 1 to 10, how much are you interested in measuring progress? And they'd say 3, and now you've got a little start. Maybe. Another question would be, who else would be interested in your progress? Maybe you're not interested, but who else would be interested in your progress? Who else would benefit if you made some progress on this? Maybe we should ask them if they've seen any progress, or what progress they've seen would be a better question. So it's an interest. I've never, like Suzanne, I've never come across an organisation who didn't want to see their own progress. But it's an interesting question nonetheless. Yeah. Thank you, Wolfgang.
I have one question. I'm sure you have had clients where there were kind of two parties which had different preferred futures. You know what I mean? There is one part of the organization who has this preferred future of becoming a marketing expert, and the other one of this preferred future of going to a kind of niche in the market or something. So what are your experiences? What works well according to your experience to deal with different directions in concerning the preferred future?
I haven't had such a clash in strategy per se, but obviously in very complex organizations there are different facets to a strategy, and there also the need to maybe build on more than one pillar, and different work streams is what comes to mind. Yeah, try out, make experiments, be clear about the fact that they're experiments and that one thing could be stopped, the other thing could be stopped. Third thing that comes to my mind is to go far enough to see what is the common, what do we have in common? Yeah, is there something? Or is it, because if there is nothing in common, then the company would need to split into two. Yeah, it needs to be then two operations, and that can also be, I haven't had that, but that could also be a solution, obviously. Yeah, that's what comes to my mind. Any other opinions?
I'm thinking that the first thing is to remember that the future perfect, or whatever you call it, is not a goal. And therefore, it's no problem at all that there are these two different things. Because the perfect is not, the point of it is not to measure ourselves in 6 months, it is to generate progress today. So I would be thinking both and, how can we make progress in both those directions? What does that mean? I would also be looking for common ground to start with, and allowing it to emerge, because solution focus is a response to a complex world. And things would emerge that we didn't know, and that we couldn't know. So, but my first thing would be just to not worry about it too much, and go on anyway, because other things will happen, and clarifications will come, and you can't say in advance what those will be. So next step, little step, let's see how we go. And acknowledge the differences. Don't try and pretend the differences aren't there, otherwise they'll think you're a fool. So acknowledge the differences, but constructively and appreciatively, and and people lose tension when they hear acknowledgement. Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you.
All right.
I was wondering, listening to you both, I understand that it's simply good solution-focused work, working with organizations, okay? Having said that, my two questions are, what for you is the added value of using gallery as a metaphor? I mean, you could do the same work without that metaphor. So what extra, I don't know, usefulness you get from using the gallery?
So for me, it's... have you finished? No?
I have another question. So the second question is, why did you use OD. I mean, working with organization is okay, but what's in the work that is considered as organizational development, like in many books that are about organizational development?
Okay, I can answer the first one. So for me, the value is the expansion of the events into descriptions, and they're getting the detail. It says very firmly what the kind of conversations to pursue, and this building the descriptions it works in a surprising ways on many levels. You think it's just a description, but actually it's affecting all sorts of things. It's affecting people's understanding, it's affecting people's bodies, it's affecting people's ability to perceive things, it's affecting what they see. And if they've just described something and then they walk out and there are elements of it, they'll see them, even if they were already there. So it's changing everything for me. And the thing I've learned over the years is the more detailed the description, the bigger the change. The bigger the change. And when people walk out of the conversation room, the workshop, they're already changed. Yeah? And now, we can't fully understand what that means yet, and they will have to have experiences outside. But, and some people used to think, I think, in the early days of solution-focused work and other things, that it was about the intervention, it was about what they would do outside. And I've now decided to come to the conclusion that's not really it. What's really it is what happens in the conversation. Things will happen outside, and we have no control over that. But the thing we have to focus on is the conversation here and now, and the person walks out different, I think.
Okay, so an insight for me was the word description, and working with descriptions, and the impact of descriptions to the people and the organization that I work with.
Yes.
Fine. So I explain your answer to myself that gallery is a form of giving space, okay, for descriptions to live, to exist. Okay.
And holding on to they come in funny orders in time, and to hold on to them as well.
Thank you. Okay.
Maybe we can talk about OD in a few minutes, but in another question.
Okay.
Just one sentence. I agree with you that for me the important thing is the term description. But the advantage of the gallery metaphor is to focus. It helps me to focus on the description, and the other thing is about what Mark said and what you said about the order. It is not you can go back and forth. You can go in the room again. This is very nice about this metaphor, because this is very crucial. Not to see we have to have this in these orders. No, we don't have to, and it's very nice. This is very nice with the space gallery metaphor. The description is easier, and
for me, the benefit is when I do contracting with my clients and ask them what are they hoping to gain, what is their purpose, what is the outcome, or organizational language. Well, basically, it's the where to question. Where are they trying to get to in this change process? And then I always hop into the resources room, and then I do work, I contract, and it merges into the preferred future work, and it's sort of Abfall, yeah. So it's spillover. It spills over into this, and then when I'm here, I also look into the resources room. Yeah, I have this tuk, and I go on, and then I go back, and then for me it just. I had this moment once, and a client asked me, so now we've asked the people, and now they've given us answers. Now what do we say? What do we do now? Shall we ask them again? I said, no, it's a conversation. And it's just this idea of a dialogue, of a solution-focused conversation that helps me provides me with orientation in this chaos that sometimes seems to happen. You work with the change team is already doing this, but you have the front office people, and they haven't even heard about it, so you need to do some contracting with them, go into the ticket office. It just keeps orientation. And also I see myself as a tour guide, yeah, a very listening, a very careful tour guide. And I'm also a bit of an art instructor in a way, because all around, didn't want to make it too complicated, but there's my workshop outside, yeah? And I'm going in and I'm helping the clients draw up the pictures, do their films, do their media art, whatever it is that they want to do. And sometimes it's actually physically, they're making videos about their preferred future. I've been in an organization for a whole day with a film team, and we filmed scenes about the preferred future, or we did drawings or sing-song, or God knows what. So it's actual acting out little cinematic parcels or presents that they can then go back to, and that helps them. Okay, last exercise, last 5 minutes. New groups, 2 or 3 people, your preferred method for any of these rooms. Yeah, any idea, anything that really works for you? Turn to your colleague, maybe share from your very full treasure chest ideas, methods, approaches, attitudes that work well for you in the gallery, in any one room in the gallery.